The real estate listing said the lake was spring-fed. That was the only lie. Everything else, the hand-hewn pine walls, the wood stove with the cast-iron door, the 60 feet of private shoreline, the queen bed under the dormer window facing east, all true. The cabin was exactly what I needed. Small, clean, remote enough that my phone lost its last bar of signal 19 miles south on the county highway, somewhere between the gas station in Harlan and the unmarked turnoff onto the dirt road that wound through 40 minutes of birch and black spruce before delivering me here, to the western shore of a lake that had no name on any map I could find. I had come to write. That was the official reason. The novel had stalled in Chicago. Stalled is generous. It had died on the table while I watched, sometime around February, when I realized I hadn't written a sentence I believed in since the previous autumn, and the apartment felt less like a home than a waiting room for someone who was never going to be called. My agent said take a month. My therapist said take as long as you need. My sister said she didn't understand why I couldn't just write at home like a normal person. None of them understood that I wasn't going somewhere. I was leaving everywhere. The cabin belonged to a man named Dale Luckner, who managed it through a listing service that looked like it hadn't been updated since 2011. No photos of the interior, no reviews, just coordinates, a monthly rate that was almost offensively cheap, and a single-line description. Quiet cabin on quiet lake, good for work. I arrived on a Tuesday in September. The key was under an overturned canoe beside the door, exactly as the email had said. The cabin smelled like pine sap and old paper. There was a wood stove, a desk by the east window, a kitchen the size of a closet, a bathroom with a rust-ringed sink, and a bedroom under the pitched roof. Adequate. More than adequate. And then there was the lake. I saw it first through the east-facing kitchen window while I was running the tap to clear the pipes. The water was maybe 200 feet from the cabin's front porch, visible through a thin screen of birch. Late afternoon light came across it from behind me, throwing the far shore into a dark hem of pine. The surface was still, not calm, not glassy on a windless day. Still, the way a floor is still, the way a photograph is still. There was a light breeze. I could feel it on my forearm through the open window, could see it moving the birch leaves between the cabin and the shore, but the water did not respond. No ripple, no shimmer, no small corrugation where wind should have caught the surface and pulled it into texture. I dried my hands. I walked outside. I stood on the shore and watched. Nothing moved. I picked up a stone, smooth gray, the size of a plum, and threw it overhand into the lake. It left my hand cleanly. I heard no splash. I saw no splash. The stone met the surface, and the surface accepted it the way a mirror accepts a hand pressed flat against it. There was a faint sound, not a splash, not a plunk, but something closer to a swallow. Soft, almost dismissible. A sound you could talk yourself out of hearing. And then the lake was still again. Perfectly. As though nothing had touched it. I stood there for a long time. Longer than made sense. I told myself it was a thermal layer, some peculiarity of depth and temperature that created surface tension beyond the normal range. I had no evidence for this. I had no understanding of limnology sufficient to support or refute it. But I am a writer, and a writer's first instinct when confronted with something inexplicable is to explain it, to reach for language, for frame, for narrative logic that makes the incomprehensible into material. The stone didn't splash, the water doesn't ripple. Fine. Cold lake, dense water, unusual mineral content. Fine. I could Google it if I had signal. I didn't. Fine. I went inside. I made coffee in the percolator on the wood stove. I opened my laptop at the desk by the east window and typed 3 sentences that I deleted before the coffee was ready. The first night, I didn't look at the lake. Not because I was afraid, because I was tired, and the drive had been long, and the bed was better than I expected. I slept with the window open and the September air coming in cool and black, and full of the sound of nothing. No frogs, no loons, no wind on water. Just the pines. Just the breathing of the trees. I woke at dawn, and the lake was there in the early light, flat and pale and unmoving, and I felt something I hadn't felt in 11 months. I wanted to write. The desk faced east. I mention this because it mattered. In the morning, the sun came over the lake and through the window, and fell on the desk and my hands and the keyboard in a way that felt like permission. I wrote for 6 hours that first full day. Not the novel, something else. Something new. Notes at first, then fragments, then paragraphs that connected to each other in ways I hadn't planned. The lake kept appearing in what I wrote. The stillness, the wrongness of a body of water that didn't behave like water. I didn't resist it. I let it in. I should tell you something about myself. I was 9 years old the first time I understood what I was. My mother took me to the ocean Rehoboth Beach, a July afternoon, the kind of day that should live in your body as pure sensation. I stood in the surf and the water hit my shins, and instead of feeling it, I heard myself describe it silently inside my head. The water is cold and it pulls at my ankles and the sand shifts under my feet and the foam is the color of old lace. I was 9 years old and I was already narrating instead of living, already converting the world into sentences before I'd finished experiencing it. My mother called me back to the blanket and I went, but I wasn't a child coming out of the ocean. I was a child composing a paragraph about coming out of the ocean. That has never stopped. Not for a single waking hour of my life. Everything I see becomes a sentence. Everything I feel becomes a phrase. The machine runs constantly and it does not have an off switch, and most of the time I am grateful for it because it is the only thing about me that has ever worked reliably. I tell you this so you understand what happened next. So you understand why I couldn't do the simple thing, the obvious thing, the thing that would have saved me. By the end of the third day I had 40 pages. 40 pages after 11 months of nothing. I read them back and they were good. Not polished, not ready, but alive. There was a pulse in them that I recognized from the best stretches of my first book, the feeling of writing slightly ahead of your own understanding, chasing a shape you can only see when you're not looking directly at it. On the evening of the third day, I went down to the lake after dinner. The sun had just gone below the tree line. The sky was a deep bruised blue, not yet dark, not yet night. The lake lay in front of me. Motionless as always, its surface carrying a faint reflection of the sky that was almost convincing. Almost the way a normal lake reflects the world above it. Almost. I stood on the shore. I watched. The light dropped another degree, and the reflection on the lake changed. Not suddenly, not like a switch, more like a slow refocusing, the way your eyes adjust when you step from a bright room into a dim one and shapes begin to resolve out of the darkness. The sky reflection dimmed, the tree line reflection dimmed, and underneath them, as though surfacing from a great depth, a new image appeared on the water. I saw myself. Not a reflection. I was standing on the shore facing the lake, so a reflection would have shown me from the front, my face, my jacket, my posture, but what I saw on the surface was me from above, lying down. On a floor, no, on the dock. The small dock I'd noticed on my first day, 20 feet to my left, extending maybe 10 feet over the water on weathered pilings. In the image on the lake's surface, I was lying on my back on that dock. My eyes were open, my hair was wet, my mouth was open too slightly, and there was water on my face, on my shirt, pooling in the hollow of my throat. I was looking at myself drowned. I stepped back. My heel caught a root. I stumbled, caught myself, looked down at my feet and then back at the lake. The image was gone. The surface was dark and still and empty. No reflection of any kind now, not even the sky. My hands were shaking. I went inside. I locked the door the first time I'd locked it since arriving, and sat at the desk without turning on the lamp and pressed my palms flat against the wood until my fingers stopped trembling. I told myself it was a trick of the light. I told myself it was pareidolia, the brain's compulsive need to find pattern and meaning in randomness. I told myself I was a writer in the middle of a creative surge, and that a creative mind is a pattern recognition machine running hot, and sometimes it sees patterns that aren't there. I almost believed it. The next evening, the fourth, I stayed inside, curtains drawn, lamp on, writing. But around 9 o'clock I stood to stretch, and my eyes drifted toward the east window, and through a gap where the curtain didn't quite meet the frame, I caught a sliver of the lake's surface. Just a sliver. Barely an inch of visible water through a quarter-inch gap in the fabric. I saw my own hand, underwater, still holding a pen, still moving, writing on nothing on the water itself or on something beneath it. The fingers curled and precise, the wrist steady, the motion unmistakable. My hand writing under the surface of the lake. It lasted less than 2 seconds. I pulled the curtain shut and stood with my back against the wall and my heart hitting my ribs so hard I could feel it in my teeth. I reached for the same word, pareidolia, and this time it crumbled before I could finish thinking it. I opened the desk drawer to look for a pen. I wanted to write both images down while they were sharp, because that's what I do, that's what I have always done. Translate the frightening into the writable, and inside the drawer, underneath a box of wooden matches and a folded map of the boundary waters, I found a manuscript. Not a full manuscript. maybe 80 pages unbound, held together with a black binder clip. The paper was high-quality printer stock, slightly yellowed at the edges. The text was double-spaced, 12-point, with 1-inch margins. Professional formatting. Someone who knew how to prepare a manuscript had prepared this one. The title page read, "The Still a Novel by Marguerite Ellison." No agent's name, no address, no date, just the title and the author. I turned to the first page. The lake does not move. I have been here for 19 days, and I have not seen it move. Not once. Not a ripple, not a wave, not the smallest disturbance on its surface. I threw a rock into it on the 5th day, and the rock sank without breaking the surface tension. I don't know how to explain that. I don't know if I need to. I read that paragraph and my breathing changed. I sat down. If this kind of quiet dread is the thing that keeps you listening, if you recognize this feeling, this pull toward a story you know you shouldn't follow, stay close. Subscribe to Grim Masquerade. Keep the light on with us. I kept reading. Marguerite's novel was written in tight, careful prose, the kind of writing that comes from someone who has been trained and has practiced and has thought hard about every sentence. It was written in first person. The narrator was a woman who had come to a cabin on a lake in northern Minnesota to write a novel. The cabin was rented from a listing service. The lake did not move. On her 7th night, the narrator looked at the lake after sunset and saw an image on the surface, an image of herself in the lake, under the water, face up, eyes open, hair suspended in a cloud around her head, drowned. I put the manuscript down. I walked to the kitchen. I poured water from the tap into a glass and drank it standing up and set the glass down and gripped the edge of the counter. Then I went back to the desk and kept reading. The narrator in Marguerite's novel did what I had done. She told herself it was nothing. She rationalized. She wrote it down. She went to bed. And the next night she went back to the lake after sunset because she couldn't not. Because the image had been so clear, so precise, so wrong, and her mind wouldn't let go of it. And besides, she was a writer. And what is a writer if not someone who walks toward the thing that frightens her because the fear might be made into something? The second night, the narrator saw more. The image on the lake showed her on the dock again, but this time she could see more of the scene. She could see the cabin behind her, its window dark, and she could see a shape in the window. A figure. Herself. Standing inside the cabin, watching herself drown. The third night, the narrator saw the sequence. First, she was inside the cabin. Then she walked to the dock. Then she stepped into the water. Then the water took her. Every step clear. Every motion voluntary. She watched herself choose to drown with the calm deliberation of someone performing a task they'd rehearsed. Marguerite's narrator became obsessed. She went to the lake every night. Each night the image gained detail. She could see what she was wearing. She could see the time on her watch. She could see the page number on the manuscript she carried to the dock before she stepped off the end of it. Page 81. I stopped reading. I counted the pages in the manuscript I was holding. 80. The manuscript ended mid-sentence on page 80. The last line was, "I know how it ends. I 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 know how it ends." 40 times. I counted. 40 repetitions filling the bottom third of the page in a single unbroken block, the font shrinking as it went, as though the words were being compressed by the weight of their own repetition. 40 iterations of the same 5 words, written by a hand that could not stop writing even when it had nothing left to say. I closed the manuscript. I put it back in the drawer. I closed the drawer. I did not go outside. In the morning I drove to Harlan. The gas station was also a bait shop, and the bait shop was also apparently the closest thing to a general store within 40 miles. A man in a quilted vest sat behind the counter reading a Louis L'Amour paperback. His name tag said Gary. I bought coffee and a bag of ice, and I asked, as casually as I could manage, whether he knew anything about the cabin on the lake north of here. Gary looked at me over his reading glasses. "Luckner's place? That's the one." "What about it? Have there been other renters? Before me?" He set the book down. "Few." "A woman named Marguerite? Marguerite Ellison?" Something moved in his face, not recognition exactly, more like confirmation of something he'd expected to hear eventually. "The writer lady." "Yes. She rented it, I don't know, 1.5 years, maybe 2 years back. Came in here a few times for groceries, kept to herself." He paused. "Last time she came in, she bought 3 pens and a ream of paper. I remember because her hand was shaking so bad she couldn't sign the receipt. And she was talking to herself, not mumbling talking, like she was reading something out loud, like she was reciting. He looked at me. I asked her if she was all right. She said she was working. She said the work was going very well. She was smiling when she said it. Biggest smile I ever saw on a person who looked that scared. He picked up his book. Never came back for her deposit. Dale said she left some things in the cabin and never called about them. Did anyone else before her? I don't know what it is about that lake that draws you people. Writers. Always writers. He turned a page, then stopped. There was one fella who left, made it all the way to Duluth, I heard. Came back 3 weeks later. Rented it again. He went back to his book. I stood there for a moment, holding my coffee. And then I left. I drove the 40 minutes back to the cabin on the dirt road, through the birch and the spruce, and I tried not to think about Marguerite Ellison's shaking hand and her enormous smile and the man who made it to Duluth and came back, and I failed. By my 5th night in the cabin, I had written 60 new pages. Not the novel I'd come to write, something else entirely. A novel about a woman who comes to a lake that doesn't move and sees her own death on its surface. I was writing it in 3rd person, which felt like distance, which felt like safety, which felt like the prophylactic of craft between me and the thing I had seen. I had made rules for myself. 3 rules, spoken aloud to the empty cabin on the morning of my 5th day because saying them out loud made them feel contractual. 1. Write only during the day. 2. Do not look at the lake after sunset. 3. Do not go near the shore at night, for any reason, not even to listen. 4 nights I held the line. 4 nights of curtains drawn and lamp on and the laptop open, writing about the very thing I was refusing to look at. The writing was extraordinary. I say that without ego, I say it with fear. It was better than anything I'd produced before. Sentences arrived fully formed. Scenes built themselves in my head with architectural precision. The novel was writing me as much as I was writing it. On the 7th evening, I looked up from a paragraph, and the room was dark. Not dim. Dark. The lamp was on, but the window was black and the light coming through the curtains had been gone, for I checked the clock 2 hours. I had been writing past sunset for 2 hours with the curtains open. The east window was uncovered. I had been facing the lake's direction the entire time, my eyes on the screen but the lake in my periphery. And I hadn't noticed the sky change because the words were coming so fast and so clean that the world outside the sentence I was building had simply ceased to exist. I slammed the laptop shut. My hands were shaking. Not from cold. Rule 1 was not as strong as I thought it was. The writing didn't respect my schedules. The writing went where it wanted, and it wanted the dark. On the 8th night, 1 night later, I went to the window. I went because the scene I was writing required it, because the character in my novel was about to go to the lake for the 2nd time, and I needed the sensory detail, the exact quality of the light, the exact smell of the shore at dusk, the exact feeling of standing before a surface that held an image it should not be able to hold. I needed to see it again to write it accurately. That is what I told myself, and I believed it, the way an addict believes that this particular drink is medicinal. I pulled the curtain back. The window faced east, toward the lake. The sun had been down for 20 minutes. The sky was the color of a deep bruise fading into black, and the lake was there, visible through the birch, and its surface held something. I could see it from the window. 60 feet away, through glass and trees, and I could still see it. Myself. On the dock, face up, wet. But there was more this time. More detail. More sequence. I could see myself walking from the cabin. I could see myself carrying something, papers, a manuscript, pages held against my chest. I could see myself stepping onto the dock. I could see myself standing at the end and looking down at the water, and I could see myself step off the edge with the calm, measured motion of someone stepping off a curb. No struggle, no hesitation, no cry. I could see the time. Not on a watch, I wasn't wearing one, but on the microwave clock visible through the kitchen window in the reflection. The green digits were reversed, but legible. 3:12 a.m. The image held for perhaps 40 seconds. Then it dimmed, and the lake was dark again. I sat down on the floor beneath the window with my back against the wall and my hands flat on the floorboards. The lake doesn't cause anything. It only shows, and I make it real by writing it down. That thought arrived with the clarity of something I'd known for days without letting myself say it. 3:12 a.m., a specific time, not a symbol, not a metaphor, a time. I looked at the microwave clock. It was 8:47 p.m. I had 6 hours and 25 minutes. I didn't sleep. I sat at the desk with every light on, and I wrote. I wrote about what I had seen. I wrote it exactly, precisely, in every detail I could recover. I wrote it all down because writing it down was the only thing I knew how to do with terror, and because some part of me believed that the act of narrating an event before it occurred was a kind of counterspell. That if I trapped the future in prose, it could not also manifest in the world. At 3 a.m., I was still at the desk. My hands were steady. The cursor blinked. At 3:05, I stood up. I did not decide to stand up. My quadriceps contracted first, both at once, with a mechanical synchrony that was not mine. Then my calves. Then the small muscles along my spine straightened me vertebra by vertebra, a sequence I could feel in specific individual segments, lumbar, thoracic, cervical, each one clicking into alignment like tumblers in a lock. My hands left the keyboard, not released, retracted, the fingers peeling off the keys with the deliberate precision of a pianist lifting her hands at the end of a piece. My right hand reached for the manuscript pages on the desk. My left hand opened the cabin door. Each motion was smooth, unhurried, and utterly wrong in the way that a puppet is wrong. The joints bending at the correct angles, but without the micro-tremors, the tiny hesitations, the animal imprecision of a body moved by its own mind. I could feel my face. My face was calm. The muscles around my mouth were relaxed. My brow was smooth. Someone had arranged my expression the way you arrange flowers, deliberately, aesthetically, with no regard for whether the flowers want to be there. Inside that calm face, I was screaming. The night air was cold, and I felt it on my arms and my neck, but my skin did not goose-pimple because goose-pimpling was involuntary, and my involuntary responses had been overwritten. My feet moved on the dirt path through the birch. Each step landed with metronomic regularity, the same length, the same pressure, the same tempo. I could feel my ankle tendons flexing with a precision I had never asked of them. My body walked the way a sentence walks when every word has been chosen in advance and there is no room for improvisation. And then I stopped, not because I willed myself to stop. Something, some friction, some remnant of volition that hadn't been overwritten, caught, like a foot snagging on a root, like a sentence that won't resolve. I stopped on the path, 30 feet from the dock, and for a span of maybe 10 seconds I stood perfectly still, my body wanting to walk, and myself wanting to stay, and the two locked against each other like a door shoved from both sides. I looked down at the pages in my hands. They were my pages, my novel, the 60 pages I had written about the lake, and beneath them, clipped with the same black binder clip, were Marguerite's 80 pages. I was carrying 140 pages of story about this lake, pressed against my chest, walking toward the water at 3:11 a.m. I dropped the pages. I don't know where the volition came from. Maybe it was the one thing a writer can do that the lake couldn't predict: abandon a draft. I dropped 140 pages onto the dirt path, and I turned and I walked. Not ran. Something in me understood that running was wrong, that running was what the body wanted, the body that was still trying to reach the dock. I walked back to the cabin, and I closed the door, and I sat on the floor with my back against it, and I waited for dawn. At 3:12, the cabin was silent. Nothing happened. At 3:13, I heard a sound from the direction of the lake, louder than the stone. Wetter. Not the soft, almost dismissible swallow of that first afternoon, but something deeper, more muscular, the sound of a living throat taking a large drink, a gulping, and then silence. In the morning, the pages were gone from the path. No trace of them. The dirt where they'd fallen was undisturbed, and where they'd lain, the ground was faintly damp, though it hadn't rained. No sound at all. The lake hadn't even needed to swallow. I looked at the dock. Something about it had changed. It took me a moment. The pilings were more evenly spaced than I remembered. The planks looked newer, straighter, as though the path from shore to water had been quietly improved overnight. The car was 12 steps from the cabin door. The keys were on the kitchen counter. The highway was 40 minutes south. I knew all of this in the way you know the location of a fire exit you have no intention of using. I went to the desk. I opened the drawer. The drawer was empty. The matches, the map, the manuscript gone, as though the drawer had never held anything but air. I sat down. I opened my laptop. The document was gone. Not deleted. There was no file in the trash, no ghost in the recovery folder. The 60 pages I'd written in the cabin did not exist on my hard drive. The lake had taken all of it. I opened a new document, and I started again. Because the story was alive in my head, more alive than anything I'd carried in years, and losing the pages didn't kill it. Losing the pages fed it. The loss became part of the narrative. Marguerite's disappearance became part of the narrative. Every horror was material. The machine had no off switch, and I was glad because the terror was producing the best work of my life. I wrote during the day, only during the day. Curtains closed after sunset. The rules still held what remained of them. I followed them with the grim discipline of someone who understands that the rules are the only architecture between herself and the water. For 3 days it worked. I wrote another 40 pages, different from the first 60, deeper, stranger, more precise. The novel had a shape now. It was about observation, about the way watching something changes it and changes you, about the human compulsion to look at the thing that will destroy you because looking is how you understand the world, and understanding is more important than survival. I wrote that sentence on my 11th day in the cabin, and I stopped typing and stared at it for a very long time. That evening, I found the guest log. It was in the cabin's single bookshelf, wedged between a water-stained copy of Walden and a Peterson's Field Guide to Northern Birds, a leather-bound notebook with unlined pages and a cord that wrapped around it to keep it closed. Most of the entries were ordinary. Great fishing. Loved the quiet. Beautiful fall colors. Dates stretching back 12 years. Names I didn't recognize. And then, about 2/3 of the way through, beautiful lake. Don't look at night. M.E. March Marguerite. Her handwriting was small and precise, and the sentence was written with a ballpoint pen that had been pressed hard into the page, leaving an impression you could feel with your fingertip. I turned the page. The next entry? She's right. I'm leaving in the morning. Whatever you do, don't write about it. Carl Odom, June. And below that, in a different pen. Too late for that advice. It's already in me. The novel won't let go. Please, if you read this, don't try to write about the lake. It's not material. It's a mouth. Unsigned, November 3. Warnings. 3 writers. 3 people who came to this cabin and found the lake waiting for them. The listing was the lure. Not a hook. Lures don't grab. Lures sit in the water and look like food and wait for something hungry to swim close. And we were always hungry. Every one of us. Starving for the silence and the solitude and the work, and the lake offered all of it. Somewhere behind me, through the cabin wall, I heard the lake make a sound. Not the swallow. Something smaller. A sound like water settling into a space it had been waiting to fill. I closed the guest log. I opened my laptop. I looked at my 40 new pages. I selected all. I pressed delete. I emptied the trash. The cursor blinked on a white screen. I closed the laptop. I picked it up. I carried it to the wood stove, opened the cast iron door, and put it inside. I shut the iron door. A coffin for the machine. I turned back to the desk. There was a pen on it that had not been there before, and beneath the pen, a stack of blank paper I hadn't bought. White, heavy, unlined. The same stock Marguerite's manuscript had been printed on. Faintly warm, not hot, not supernatural, just the warmth of pages fresh from a printer, as though they had been prepared for me moments ago. The cabin was providing stationery. I picked up the pen. I pick up pens. It's reflexive. A writer sees a pen and picks it up the way a carpenter picks up a hammer lying on the floor. Not because they need it, but because it belongs in their hand. I put it down. I picked it up again. And this time my hand began to move. Not of my volition, or not entirely. More like the way your hand moves when you're taking notes in a lecture and your mind is somewhere else and the pen keeps going on its own. Automatic writing. My hand was moving, and the words appearing on the white paper were, "She came to the cabin in September. She came to write. She came because the silence was what she needed, and the lake was what she found, and the lake showed her how she would end, and she could not stop looking because looking was who she was." I was writing about myself, in third person. That same borrowed remove, as though third person could save me from first person consequences, but these words were not mine in the way a reflection is not yours, accurate but reversed. Familiar but belonging to the surface that holds it. I pulled the pen away from the paper. It took physical effort, as though the pen were magnetized to the page. I put the pen and the paper in the wood stove beside the laptop, which lay screened down on the iron grate, its glass cracked, already irrelevant. I went to the bedroom, where the dark was thicker and the lake was behind me instead of ahead. I lay down. The mattress held my weight, all of it, still, for now. I closed my eyes. I would not write. I would not look. I would not observe or narrate or convert any part of what was happening into prose. I would lie here in the dark and be a body that does not write, and in the morning, I would leave. It lasted until I realized I was composing the paragraph about the plan while I lay there. I would not write, I would not look, the words were forming in clean, cadenced prose, and I understood then, fully and finally, what I had been circling for days. The prose was the looking, had always been the looking. I didn't need a pen, I didn't need a laptop, I didn't need paper. The lake didn't need me to put words on a surface. The lake only needed me to narrate, to frame, to structure what I saw into story, even silently, even internally, even in the privacy of my own cognition. Every sentence I composed in my mind was another look at the surface, and every look made the future more fixed. And I couldn't stop. I have never been able to stop. The machine that started at 9 years old on Rehoboth Beach has never turned off. Not once. Not for a single waking hour. The lake hadn't chosen me. I was pre-selected. Every writer who came to this cabin was pre-selected. The compulsion to observe, to narrate, to convert experience into story, it was the vulnerability the lake required, and we brought it with us, pre-installed, like a key cut for a lock we hadn't yet found. In the morning, my 12th morning, I packed the car. I moved quickly. I didn't look at the lake. I kept my eyes on my hands, on the bags, on the car's trunk. I hummed. A tuneless, wordless sound to fill the channel in my brain where language lived, to keep the narrator in my head from finding silence to speak into. I closed the trunk. I walked to the driver's side. I opened the door, and I looked at the lake. Not by choice. A loon called from the direction of the water. The first animal sound I'd heard since arriving, and I turned toward it reflexively, and my eyes crossed the lake's surface, and in the half-second before I looked away, I saw myself at the desk, writing. Not drowned, not on the dock, not in the water. At the desk, in the cabin, with the curtains open and the lamp on and pages stacked beside me, and my hand moving across paper with a fluency that looked like joy. Writing. Just writing. Page after page, my face calm, my posture settled, the deep comfort of a person doing the only thing they have ever known how to do. And then the image continued. Time moved in the reflection. The stack of pages grew. The lamp stayed on. Night fell, and morning came, and I was still at the desk. And another night, and another morning. The pages stacked higher. My face didn't change. My hand didn't stop. And slowly, so slowly I almost didn't see it, my body began to fade. Not disappear, fade. Like a photograph left in sunlight. Like a word erased and written over so many times the paper wears through. I was becoming less solid with each page I wrote. The pages were gaining weight as I lost it. The manuscript was becoming more real than I was. The last image before I tore my eyes away, my hand barely visible, a translucent outline moving a pen across paper that was thick and white and real, and the chair empty except for the faintest impression of a body that had once sat there, and the pages stacked 3 inches high and glowing with the solidity of something that had been paid for in full. I got in the car. I started the engine. I drove. The dirt road took 40 minutes. I hummed. I counted trees. I recited state capitals in alphabetical order. Albany, Annapolis, Atlanta, Augusta, Austin, filling every available cognitive space with noise so the narrator couldn't speak. I reached the county highway. I turned south. The road was straight and empty, and the sky was wide, and the trees were thinning, and I was leaving. 10 miles south of the turnoff, I pulled over. I sat in the car on the shoulder of the county highway with the engine running and the tears running down my face. Not from fear, from loss. The story was still in me, fully formed, complete. The best thing I would ever write. The thing that would justify every empty month, every morning I'd sat at a desk and wondered if the person who wrote the first book was someone I'd only been temporarily. It was all there, and every word of it would be a look at the lake, and every look would make the future more fixed. And I would fade into the pages, the way Marguerite faded, the way Carl faded, the way the unsigned writer faded one word at a time, trading substance for narrative, becoming less real so the story could become more real. I sat there until the tears stopped, which took longer than the decision. Then I pulled back onto the highway, and I drove north. I have been back in the cabin for 13 days. I write during the day. I write at night. I don't close the curtains anymore. I don't need to. The lake shows me what's coming, and I write it down, and what I write is true, and what's true is beautiful, and what's beautiful is worth what it costs. My hand is lighter today than it was yesterday. The pen feels heavier, or my fingers feel thinner, I can't tell which. This morning I held my hand up to the window and I could see the lake through it, through my hand, just barely. Just the faintest suggestion of water and birch visible through my palm, as though my skin were tracing paper held up to the light. The chair has stopped creaking when I shift my weight. I noticed that 2 days ago. I sit and the wood is silent, as though it's holding nothing. My footsteps sound thinner now, not quieter, thinner. Like hearing someone walk in an adjacent room through a wall. Yesterday I reached for the desk to steady myself and my fingers dipped into the wood, not through it into it. A 1/4 inch, the way a hand dips into water. I pulled back and the desk was solid again, or I was solid again, and I couldn't tell which one of us had given. The manuscript pages on the desk cast shadows, crisp, dark-edged, real. My hand above them casts nothing, as though the light no longer considers me a solid thing. I stopped eating 4 days ago. Not by choice, I forget. The writing is more interesting than hunger. The writing is more interesting than anything. Marguerite was right. I know how it ends. It ends with a completed manuscript in a desk drawer and an empty chair and a lake that holds somewhere in its depth the dissolved remainder of a woman who couldn't stop looking. But the manuscript will be here for the next writer. They'll come. They always come. The listing is still up. I checked before I lost signal, and it was still there. The same cheap listing with no photos and no reviews. Quiet cabin on quiet lake, good for work. A writer will find it. A writer who needs silence. A writer who needs to disappear. They'll sit at this desk and open this drawer and find these pages, and they'll read them the way I read Marguerite's, with a recognition that tightens in the chest like a hand closing. And they won't be able to stop reading. And they won't be able to stop writing. And the lake will show them their future, and the showing will make it true, and the writing will make it beautiful, and the beauty will cost them everything. I have perhaps 3 days before my hand becomes too faint to hold the pen. I can feel the weight leaving me the way warmth leaves a room when the fire goes out gradually. Then suddenly, then it's just cold, and you can't remember what warmth felt like. This is page 213. The pen is lighter than air, or my hand is lighter than the pen. I am becoming less real than the words I leave behind. This is what the lake offers. A trade, your substance for your story, your body for your book. You become the manuscript. The manuscript becomes you, and the lake holds you both forever in a surface that never moves because nothing that enters it ever leaves. If you find this, if you are the next writer sitting at this desk reading these pages, I want you to know that I am not warning you. I am not warning you because I know it won't work. Marguerite warned me. Carl warned me. The unsigned writer warned me. I read their warnings, and I understood their warnings, and I wrote about their warnings, and the writing was another form of looking, and the looking was another step toward the dock. But I want you to know that the last thing I saw, the very last image the lake showed me, on the night I decided to stay, was not my drowning. It was the manuscript, sitting in the drawer, whole and complete and radiant with the life I'd poured into it, and it was being read by someone whose face I couldn't see. And that person was weeping. Not from fear, from recognition, from the devastating, annihilating recognition that comes when you read something true. That is what the lake showed me. That is why I stayed. The story was worth it. The story is always worth it. That is the horror and the grace of it. That is the trap that has no door, because the trap is the thing you love. I'm going to finish this page, and then I'm going to put the manuscript in the drawer, and then I'm going to walk down to the dock. The lake is very still tonight. It's always still.